The year is 410 AD. The heart of an empire is about to be broken. For centuries, Rome stood untouchable, its walls unchallenged, its power unquestioned, its name feared across the world, and generations lived and died believing one thing, that Rome could never fall. But tonight, that belief is dying. The gates are opening, not in triumph, but in terror, and from the shadows, an enemy long kept at the edges is now inside. The streets erupt into chaos shouts, footsteps, the clash of steel echoing through the city that once ruled everything. Soldiers scramble, citizens flee, and fires begin to rise as the impossible is no longer a warning, it is happening. For 800 years, no enemy had breached Rome until this night. But what really happened inside the city was far worse than anyone expected. To understand the shock of that night, you have to understand what Rome represented to the world. This was not just a city, it was the eternal city, a symbol of power, wealth, and absolute dominance. Its empire stretched across continents. Its armies had crushed countless enemies, and its name alone commanded fear and respect. For nearly 800 years, since the distant humiliation of the sack of Rome, 390 BC, no foreign force had successfully broken into the city. Rome wasn't supposed to fall. It wasn't even supposed to be threatened. But beyond the grand temples and towering walls, something had changed. The empire was no longer the unstoppable force it once was. Political instability had weakened its leadership. Corruption had eroded its strength, and its once mighty military was no longer invincible. And waiting just beyond its borders was a new kind of threat led by Alaric I and his Visigoths, a determined force that had spent years pushing against Rome's defenses, no longer content to remain in the shadows of an empire that was quietly losing its grip. Rome still looked powerful, but inside it was already breaking. The road to Rome's downfall was paved long before the gates were opened. Alaric I had not appeared out of nowhere. He had spent years testing the empire's patience, making demands for land, gold, and recognition that Rome was either unwilling or unable to meet. Each envoy he sent was met with delay, each negotiation ignored or dismissed, fueling both his frustration and his resolve. Over time, the Visigoths moved closer to the heart of the empire, conducting raids, surrounding towns, and testing the limits of Roman defenses. Inside the city, the people were beginning to feel the pressure. Supplies dwindled, breadlines grew longer, and a gnawing fear settled over the population like a shadow. Rumors of betrayal, incompetence, and military failure spread faster than the truth. Rome's once proud leadership faltered, paralyzed by political infighting, unable to organize an effective defense or provide comfort to its citizens. Every day the threat grew. Every day the city's veneer of invincibility cracked just a little more. Whispers of doom began to fill the streets, and even those who had once believed Rome could never fall now questioned whether the walls would hold. Then, in August 410 AD, something unthinkable happened. The culmination of years of pressure and delay reached its terrifying peak. The city that had seemed untouchable was suddenly vulnerable. And in the dead of night, the gates of Rome opened, not to welcome friends, but to let in an enemy long thought to be contained. Some say the gates were betrayed from within, opened by those who saw opportunity or feared what was to come, while others claim the Visigoths forced their way through with relentless determination. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Shadows poured into the streets, torches cutting through the darkness as footsteps echoed off the stone walls, a relentless tide of warriors flooding into the heart of the empire. Citizens woke screaming, stumbling into streets now filled with confusion and terror. Soldiers tried desperately to rally, but command was fractured, and panic spread like wildfire from street to street. Fires began to burn as looted torches set homes and warehouses alight, and the city that had once struck fear across continents now quivered under its invaders. Every corner, every alley, every plaza became a scene of chaos, and the realization hit like a hammer: Rome had been breached. For 3 days, Rome descended into a nightmare that no one could have imagined. The streets ran with panic as Visigoths looted homes, temples, and treasures that had stood untouched for centuries, while terrified citizens fled, hid, or fell to their knees begging for mercy. Families were torn apart in the crush of chaos, children clutching parents who could do little to protect them, and nobles who had once commanded armies and palaces were reduced to nothing overnight. The air was thick with smoke and the cries of the desperate as fires from torches and looted stores spread through the city, casting the streets in a hellish glow. Some of the invaders, driven by desperation or code of faith, spared the churches, allowing frightened civilians to gather inside as temporary refuges, while others ransacked everything in sight, leaving sacred halls stripped bare. Markets, fountains, and courtyards that had once been symbols of Roman wealth and civilization were turned into scenes of ruin. Each alley seemed alive with terror, every corner a gamble between safety and violence, and the city's once unshakable order was gone. The walls that had protected generations could not protect them now, and for those who survived to watch, the horror was inescapable. The greatest city in the world was now helpless. Rome was more than stone, gold, and blood. It was an idea, a symbol of power and permanence that had endured for centuries. Its fall sent shockwaves far beyond the city walls, reverberating across the empire and into the minds of all who had believed in its invincibility. Even Saint Sanoe, Augustine, witnessing the devastation, questioned what this meant for the world, pondering how the eternal city could be humbled so completely. For centuries, Rome had represented security, order, and civilization itself. Now, as smoke rose from the ruins and terrified survivors wandered through streets stripped of meaning, the lesson was clear: if Rome could fall, then no city, no empire, no institution was truly safe. The sack didn't just destroy Rome, it shattered belief in its eternity. In the years that followed, the empire struggled to regroup, but the damage was already done. Rome continued to exist as a political entity, but its prestige had crumbled, its authority questioned, and its enemies emboldened. What had once been the center of the known world now stood weakened, a shadow of its former glory, and the fall of its capital marked the beginning of the end for Western Rome. Power, once thought eternal, proved fragile. Empires crumbled not only from external forces but from the rot and indecision within. Rome's survival in name could not restore its dominance, and the world had witnessed that even the mightiest can be brought low. Rome wasn't destroyed in a single night. The flames and chaos of 410 AD were only the culmination of decades of decline, mismanagement, and fractured leadership. The walls that once seemed unbreakable, the armies that once struck fear across continents, and the institutions that had ruled the world quietly faltered long before the Visigoths arrived. What the sack revealed was not just the vulnerability of a city, but the fragility of power itself, the inevitability of change, and the truth that even empires that seem eternal are subject to collapse. The sack of 410 AD didn't end Rome, it revealed that it was already falling.